Camera 3. Oh, don't mind us. Just getting work done here. Right up to the last second, folks. Oops. Welcome to Welcome to Emotionships, where we talk about the real reason everything happens for a reason. I am your host, along with my what?
What's your name?
Oh, my bad. I am your host, Helen Keller, along with my congruent co-host, Mallory Redmond.
Impressive. We're on the spot.
Thank you.
Was that actually on the spot, or were you just acting like
No,
this?
that was on the spot. No acting here. Mal, welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm fine. I'm good.
Okay. Doesn't sound like it.
Sorry. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Everybody. No, I feel I'm doing well.
Okay.
It's a new day.
Sure is.
Every day's Christmas.
Isn't that the truth?
Merry Christmas.
The world's falling apart.
I think you say that a lot.
Do I?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that way. The world just thinks that way. I don't think it's falling apart.
Well, then why would you
Did
say
you
that?
hear?
Oh.
Well, I'm going to tell you. Thankful for Huffington Post and the weird news section.
You read the Huffington Post?
I read a lot of different news outlets.
Wow.
Impressive.
That seems like really left for you.
Oh, I read a lot of sources. But
that's good. That's nice and balanced.
Thanks to the Huffington Post and their weird news section.
They do have a good weird news section.
They do. 500 students got acceptance letters to the University of Kentucky. Oops, just an accident. They didn't mean to go out.
What do you mean?
Well,
How does that happen? How does that even happen?
I guess it must be, I don't know.
You know what this is.
What?
I'll tell you what's happening.
420.
No.
Oh.
They probably are doing what whoever, Domino's or whatever, and they have computers doing all of the letters and they screwed it up.
Oh, yeah, the Domino's truck.
Yeah.
Thanks for the reminder.
Keep people employed.
There was another really interesting story. Oh, in Daytona Beach, where a lot of craziness has happened, a car was late. Someone was late, and they did not want to wait for the drawbridge. And so as the arms came down,
yes,
they ran through them.
Sure.
And did what I've always wanted to do. Jump that drawbridge.
Yeah.
And they were,
were they successful?
They were.
Oh.
If you look it up, they broke those arms, but
Sure.
the car only got like a foot off the ground. But yeah.
What's on your socks?
Umbrellas.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
What was the thought behind wearing those today?
There wasn't. It's
yeah,
just
right.
No, there wasn't. I just put my hand in that top drawer and what came out, came out.
Wow.
Yeah, other things can come out of that top drawer other than socks, but this time umbrella socks came out.
I'm not biting. Gelman says not to bite. I'm not biting.
Don't do it. Yeah, so all kinds of craziness. I was listening to a wonderful podcast this morning.
Was it called Emotionships?
Yeah, in addition to our podcast, I was listening to another episode of The Liturgists.
Yeah, such a great podcast.
It's a very good podcast, and I think you were the one that told me they were doing less episodes in order to do production value.
To increase their production value, which I could tell in this, because I think I listened to the same episode as you.
Yeah.
I could tell that something just got in my throat. I could tell that they had upped their production.
If you are interested in all things God and Christianity, The Liturgist is a wonderful podcast for you to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
It might disrupt you a little bit.
Sure, it's good for you.
But if you don't have a problem with being disrupted, then you're good.
Yeah.
And if you do have a problem with being disrupted, then you're not good, and you need to listen to it anyways.
It's true.
But I could tell the production value was good, and they said a lot of things about Jesus, whom they call and identify as Josh, in the podcast.
That took me a second.
Did it?
Have you been familiar with people calling Jesus Josh?
Yes.
I have not.
Yes.
And I think it's
Yeshua.
well, yeah, I've heard that before, but like
Yeah.
actual, like in English, Josh,
Yeah.
it took me it's a little bit like disrupts my upbringing.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You can't just call him Josh.
Yeah, how could you do such a thing? How could you take the Son of God and
just call him
humanize
Josh?
him?
Oh my goodness.
How dare you?
Josh is so normal.
Isn't it just such an indication of the problems that we have that some of the things that church people worry about would be calling Jesus Josh?
Oh, sure.
I think it's a really good indicator of why things are the way they are.
There's a lot of church people who are very good at worrying.
Oh, for sure, because that's where they find their value.
Sure.
I really resonate with a lot that was said in this past episode of The Liturgist entitled Josh the Christ.
So can you explain why they're calling him Josh?
Well, I mean, Michael Gungor, who produces the show, opens up and basically gives a couple of quotes from our theologian down there in Texas. Hold on, his name is coming to me.
It's coming.
Universal Christ.
Wasn't it Richard?
Yes, Richard Rohr. And he basically just says that a lot of people have used those two terms interchangeably, Jesus and the Christ. Mm-hmm. And they're really two separate meanings and two separate roles being fulfilled there. Yeah. And so Jesus was completely human and completely God and came to model what this life, this energetic, eternal life looked like. And the Christ is what they go on to say, and I agree, and this has been my experience, is it's a level of consciousness that Jesus demonstrated as well, but that it's when he talks about the kingdom, it is a way of living and thinking and being at its core that we are invited into in order to experience all of the promises that Jesus made, which is a lot of what he was demonstrating and fulfilling. What do you think about that?
So that's why they're calling him Josh?
Well, Josh is the humanizing him and pointing to him being a human being that embodied what Christ means and what Christ looks like.
Yeah. Is
that how you would summarize it, or how would you say it based on what you heard?
No, I think that's how I would summarize it. I mean, there were a couple parts that I listened to where I had to kind of pause and think oh wait, this feels really uncomfortable to me.
Sure, yeah.
Do I agree with this?
Based on how you were raised,
yeah,
correct?
Right, exactly, yeah. Which was an evangelical upbringing. And so, I'm cool with disagreeing,
Sure.
I don't feel like I need to listen to that podcast and even to say it's a good podcast, you should listen to it.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I have to completely agree with it, but it's definitely thought provoking.
Sure. I agree with a lot of it, which will probably disrupt some people. But what I say is that it really resonates with my experience, and that's all that you have. And so I'm a little different than most people in that, I have been a pastor for 15 years and have had or been afforded the opportunity to study and learn theology for the last 20 plus years. And having what I used to call a God encounter, which I would still probably call a God encounter.
What else would you call it?
I mean, again, God is just it's an identifier, which I think in this episode they're really pointing out can be the problem when we construct, for the sake of our ego, institutions that give us value. I was recently saying that I was thankful. I was saying to someone that I was thankful that my kids are not in Christian education. And the reason for that is last night I was working on something downstairs, and Charlie, our 16-year-old, came down and he had his phone, and one of his friends was on the phone, and it was on speakerphone, and Charlie just said, "Hey, Dad, talk to my friend. He has a couple of questions about hell." And so I'm like, okay. And the young man went on to say, hey, I've never really believed in God or considered that God exists, but like watching your son, Charlie, like he's made me rethink this whole idea of God. And I have a couple of questions for you about hell. And so, we talked about a couple of things, like if someone commits suicide, or the questions that you and I were familiar with growing up in church camp, like if someone passes and doesn't have an opportunity to profess faith, will they still go to heaven or will they end up in hell?
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, like, it's really good that my kids are in an environment where no one is obligated to profess a certain belief system in order to be there in the first place. That's one. And that my son and my other children have had an opportunity to model a way of living that other people say, ooh, that's interesting. Let me hear more about it. Like, that's humbling too. But my main thought around why I am grateful my kids are not in Christian education is because in a Christian environment, there is a backdrop of ego where you are going to do it well or not do it well. And so in a basketball environment, everyone measures a person's worth on that team based on their ability to contribute to the game, right? Mm-hmm. Which has always been interesting to me. I think I've told the story before where I was in Hebrew class and reading right to left messed with my dyslexic mind like nobody's business. So I was not great at it. And the professor was giving me a hard time because I was asking a really deep question, but it just sounded so simple that it came across as stupid to him. And I left there and was walking over to participate in some soccer match. And at the time I would say God, and now I like to say like eternal energy. And I'm not denying that God exists, but I definitely like disrupting a belief system in order to see more and experience more. And so I hear on my way from Hebrew class over to practice, if you put the professor on the soccer field right now with you, who would be the hero and who would be like, the butt of the jokes? And obviously the roles would reverse. And so when I think about my kids not being in Christian school, I'm glad that they are going to have to work for who they are and how they fit in and how they have value amongst their community that cannot be associated with their belief system or their faith. Mm-hmm. Because what ends up happening, my experience having gone from kindergarten to 12th grade in Christian education, which I'm not faulting anyone, and I'm thankful for the people that influenced me in the education that I received. But what happens, and this happens in church environments as well, people end up attaching their sense of self-worth to what they think they believe. And the reason why I say what they think they believe versus what they actually believe is because most of us don't see the difference between how we behave, which is how we really believe, and what we project out into the world as to what we want to believe. And it's often not until there's a lot of pressure and heartache and disappointment and setback that you can even see the difference between what you're projecting as to be your belief system and how you're living, which is your real belief system. And so what I'm saying is, often my experience has been, whether it's in grade school or high school or college or grad school, in environments where quote unquote Christian education is a thing, it is very easy for people's ego, their sense of self, to attach to this set of beliefs, and in doing so, undermining the very essence, according to this podcast, and what I also happen to believe, of who Jesus and the Christ was. Jesus as a human being embodying this way of living that was a detachment from ego. Everything was in the moment. I am, like I am, because I am right here, free from any outside message telling me, oh, you're valuable because you're a politician. Oh, you're valuable because you're a carpenter. Oh, you're valuable because you were born here. Like, the idea is that Jesus, Josh, the human, came to model a way of living that was void of or detached from the ego, which unfortunately, I think a lot of Christian history models that the church became the very thing that Jesus wanted to get rid of and say, if you want to experience heaven on earth, you have to detach your ego, your sense of self-worth from everything to include what you believe.
Let me figure out where to start with all of that. Okay.
But you know what I'm saying? I mean, we've all been around those people.
Enough.
We've all been around those people.
Yeah. And I think a couple of things. I would love, like, maybe practical, if you could just give it like a practical example, especially as it pertains to like Christian school, because I went to public school. Obviously, I was raised in the church, and so it's a little bit of a different experience.
Yeah,
but
you're a hybrid.
I think it's like isn't it more of a human experience, the ego thing,
I think
rather
it
than
is.
a Christian?
Well, I think it is, but the sad part about it is, whereas the person that has not been raised in church or Christian education attaches their ego to whatever they're doing in life, however they're working. And like, if they are a golfer, they feel great on the golf course when they're playing well and the people around them are not as good at golf. Or if they're an attorney, they feel better about themselves when they went to the right school and was hired by the right firm and are working the right cases and getting paid the right amount of money. Like, basically the idea is, and again, this is my experience, and this is why other religions, primarily to include the Buddhists, get this so right, when like the idea of detachment and like life is the absence of all of these things giving me meaning. And so in the specific example, yes, you're right. Everyone is going to want to find something that says to them, this is why you are valuable. This is why you should feel good about yourself. What we're saying with the dichotomy here of Christianity and faith is, when the very thing that was meant to be given to us to liberate us and to free us from anxiety and worry and pride and judgment and all of the selfishness, all of those things, when the very thing that was given to us to help us and to free us to live the like full life, the life that Jesus modeled, that becomes something itself to achieve within. And so practically speaking, what it comes across as is judgment and arrogance. You're not living this way. You're not doing this. Oh, you did that. Yeah. Like that's where it's class warfare within morality. It's not the Jesus movement. It's, there's no way they love God as much as I love God, because look at what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And so it's a class warfare that did not exist with the Jesus movement. He came to take it out of the church. And then, for a number of reasons, it made its way back into buildings with Constantine, and it's, been going that way ever since. But the idea, and I haven't read it yet, but I want to read it, especially after hearing Richard Rohr on a couple of these episodes, like the universal Christ, like it's Jesus being an archetype and modeling for us what it looked like to be connected to this divine energy, detached from our ego.
Yeah. This morning, Annie, who's our 1-year-old, she wanted applesauce. So I gave her like a little pouch of applesauce. She knows exactly where it is. So I'm like, do you want some applesauce? She gets really excited and is like, yeah. And running in place and all of that. She goes to where the applesauce is. I grab her a pouch of it or whatever. And she gets so excited and like ahead of herself that she just runs away. And she's like yelling and she's excited and she's happy and she runs away and she doesn't have the applesauce. And so I thought about, for some reason, this moment was like, it gave me pause, because I'm like, it's so wild. Like the thing that you're super excited about, you just walked away from.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if she thought she had it or what, but like she got so ahead of herself that she just like ran off into the other room and she didn't have the applesauce. And it took her a really long time to realize, like, to calm down and realize like, oh, I don't have the thing that I want.
And that's what even as recent as this past Sunday, that I was talking about, like 2 Timothy 3 says, like, it's a form of godliness that denies the power, like the actual substance. Gungor quotes Augustine and just says, what do you love when you love God? Like, what are you actually loving when you love God? And the answer to that is life.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we should be in love with, because Jesus came to model a way of life that was the most rewarding way to live it. He was a model.
Yeah.
And so in the same way, Jesus said to the religious ruling class, like, you guys worship this sacred text, and it was meant to lead you to me, a model that will show you how to live life. But you love like ink on a page. You love like an absence of faith. You love creating systems where no questions exist and no one can ask anything without being a heretic.
You
And
love
like
coming to church on Sunday morning with your family wearing coordinated outfits, looking the part, and you're all actually really miserable.
100%.
Yeah.
And so, like, we'll start getting questions, and people will talk about me or talk about you on this podcast, like what we're doing and who has gotten a hold of us and how we've been influenced. But like, let me just invite every miserable MFer to step back and look at their own life for a second. But listen, I was anticipating this as I was thinking, like, this is the direction that we could go. Why in the world? Like, this is a perfect example of the ego. Instead of evaluating your level of joy and contentment and excitement for your own life, you have got to activate your ego by assessing someone else's life. And like, I'm not doing this because you pay me to do this. There's not a listener that is paying us to talk about these things. We're talking
Though that would be nice.
Yeah,
If
I'm
you
not
would
opposed
like to
to
throw
it.
us some dollars.
I'm not opposed to it.
Yeah.
But it comes back to, like, at the end of the day, do we have to keep questioning everyone that asks questions about a system that consistently does not deliver? Why is it so hard for us to see that a lot of the North American evangelical faith that we have been given does not deliver? Who needs more evidence than that? I mean, if you believe Jesus exists and all of these promises are true, do a little audit to see how many of them you feel like you've received and are walking in. And like, I constantly talk to miserable people that believe with all of their heart that Jesus was the Christ, and they want to follow him and they want to inherit these things, and they don't. Yeah. Which means we need to ask better questions and figure out, like, where things have gone wrong and what we might need to do in order to inherit the eternal life, the Christ consciousness that we've been promised we can tap into. Mm-hmm. But it's just amazing to me, the people that defend the systems that do not deliver for them. I had to say that to a family member recently that was asking me about my kids in Christian education and different things that I've said here at City Church. And I was just like, hold on a second. Why are my decisions and questions what we are evaluating? Why don't we go back to the fact that all of these things have not delivered for us? And I just finally had to say to the person, like, are you happy with where you are? Like, you and I both know some of the things that you're going through right now. Are you happy with where you are? And because you're not, the answer is no with the dysfunction that you're experiencing. Why wouldn't we just reevaluate our belief system and wonder where we got off track? Let's start there.
Mm-hmm. So do you think the majority of people who are, what we're saying, miserable, are aware of that? I mean, how aware do you think people are that things are not delivering?
I think, and not to keep pointing to this podcast, but I think what they do a good job of is, Gungor opens up and says, hey, what about original sin? Right. And I like the answer that is given, that it's the difference between knowing who we are and suspecting what's out there. And so when we have this sense that we were created for greatness and good things, and those aren't present in our life. Like, we are candidates, great candidates for guilt and shame. And so I think, one of the reasons why people will stay where they are and not question their belief system is because built into that belief system is a false narrative within the belief system, not the words, that you are inherently bad, and questions are a lack of faith versus faith. Questions, especially when you can see it more clearly in the Old Testament, was an indication of faith, not a lack thereof. Somehow, and it really started in 310 AD when the center of Christianity went from, being amongst the poor in the Middle East to in the most affluent country and nation on the earth, which was Rome. When quote unquote Christianity got put back inside buildings, like, it became about that class warfare and judgments and who was doing it right and who wasn't. And it became a man-made thing again, where guilt and shame in comparison were real. Right. And so when they talk about, like, original sin being the evaluation of myself and me potentially not being worthy to receive these things, that's where I think a lot of people are. They have come to accept the cage that they live in, because to question whether or not, I'll give you an example. Scripture is inspired or infallible the way that we were taught, which I'm leaning toward believing the way that we were taught that Scripture is inspired and infallible was a way for people in authority and that therefore held power to control us and make us go to them, versus understanding, like, the spiritual nature of what God says and how he confirms it from multiple sources through nature, other people, experiences, etc. It's a lot, right?
You're going to get some phone calls.
You're not kidding. Hey, before you call me or text me, just examine your own life. If you're happy,
okay, well, this is
maintain your happiness and leave me alone.
This is what I want you to say more about, is like,
Yes.
If you're miserable, I mean, life is hard.
Sure.
And I just preached a sermon about, like, you got to be able to feel your feelings, and sometimes there's some really bad feelings.
Sure.
So what is the experience supposed to be like, or how are we supposed to be feeling, or how do we know that we are living like this authentic life with Jesus? Josh.
Yeah.
Or what the eternal energy.
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of it comes down to recognizing that ego is the primary problem, and that we are invited, like, the lifestyle that Jesus modeled was that of laying it down and, like, trusting in God's intent and loving nature toward us. And when we become recipients of that, we want to extend that to other people. And so when Augustine says, like, what are you loving when you love God, right? Like, some of the commentary goes on in the podcast to say, like, God kicked mankind out of the garden because he established this is the way it should be, only to go after them and to find them, and to let them feel the feelings of being found and, like, pursued. And so, like, love is the manifestation and the embodiment of, like, life. And life has, like, life is broad. It doesn't have a limited definition. And so I think, practically speaking, for the person that is wondering, like, what does a life with Jesus look like? I think it's about, like, a sense of deep joy and gratitude and recognition for the moment, and being appreciative of the moment, no matter what I'm up against, that I live in, which means I've developed the ability to detach from my present circumstance and what it's wanting to tell me, and instead find, the things that exist that that make me grateful, that bring me joy. And so we see this in biblical characters, and we see this, like, practically speaking, in the lives of people like Nelson Mandela and Corrie ten Boom, and people that went through very, very rough situations, but somehow they detached from their ego, which would say, I deserve this level of life. I deserve this level of respect just to be and to exist. And basically what we have learned, and even why we started this podcast, is because we believed that the signal, like a router, broadcasting information out through Wi-Fi, the signal of love and goodness and mercy and joy and commitment exists out there. And it's our responsibility to tune in and to figure out how to tap into that life that created all things and holds all things together, according to Colossians. And what a big step is, or the primary step in that, is detaching from ego. And essentially, I believe that that's what Jesus meant when he talked about like laying down your cross, or taking up your cross, like laying down of everything laying down of everything I feel like I deserve to be present and to exist and say, life owes me nothing. Mm-hmm. I am going to be grateful. I'm going to be present, and I'm going to seek the good. I'm going to pursue life and share that with other people. And
I think what you're able to do when you are living in the present moment. So the other day, I think it was last week, I was driving Evie, 3-year-old, to daycare. And I don't know what was happening, but it was just a rough morning. And she was in a mood and I was in a mood. And so we're driving to school and I could just tell that she was struggling. And so I was asking her about it. And I said, Evie, do you feel like you need to cry? She was like, yes. And I said, you know what? I feel like I need to cry too. And we cried. And then the moment was over,
Yeah.
and it's like, it got to get out, and it increased my gratitude, not only to share that moment with my daughter and let her see it's okay. Sometimes I need to cry too.
Sure.
But there was the release of the emotions, and it increased my gratitude for the ability to feel my feelings and then go on.
Yeah.
I think it was last episode. Did you talk about the birds?
Yeah.
Last episode.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a, do I have to repeat? Go listen to the last episode if you want that story. But
if you want to know about the birds.
But I think it's a gift of living in the present moment and not trying to be anything to anybody,
Sure.
Be putting off some show for somebody,
Sure.
but to just really be authentic. And I think the more that you can be authentic, the less miserable that you're actually going
100%.
to be.
Your belief system is what's making you miserable.
Yeah.
People don't realize very quickly Christianity can become a list of rules and things to do that when you are not doing them become miserable. And that is not what Jesus came to model. It is not your good works or your good acts that are going to bring you value. And so detaching from the ego is the recognition that even and this is what Paul meant, my righteousness is as filthy rags, meaning I'm never going to do enough good things to make myself feel better about myself. It's actually quite the opposite. It's detaching from, if I do this, I get this, to realize I am so grateful that I have an opportunity to live, and the hard things are opportunities that I am being allowed to experience to appreciate life more and to extend it to other people more.
Right.
And very quickly, we do not suspect how our ego undermines us. And so in religious circles where our value becomes what we can do and how we can believe and how we can perform. And a lot of people don't realize that's what it is. It's a performance. We end up measuring ourselves against other people. And that's where our sense of value exists. I'm not doing this, so I am more valuable. I am doing this, so I am more valuable. And there are people that are going to listen to this podcast and be like, glad that's not me. Right. And in a sense, that thought, glad it's not me, is very ego driven.
For sure.
And so, here's Jesus that is completely detaching from what makes him valuable. And he is therefore able to tap into that Colossians 1 energy that made all things and by which everything is held together.
Yeah.
And so, what we have meant by the real reason everything happens for a reason is because, starting a year and a half ago when we started talking about this podcast, we were suspicious of the yellow tape that has been put around Jesus' life. that says you have to live and believe a certain way in order to tap into this eternal energy that created everything and is holding everything together. We have been suspicious of the yellow tape. And so, starting Body Garage Dayton and working with energy and like being able to tell people what's going on in their life and being able to see people's back pain go away without saying in Jesus' name or making it an official prayer. Like that is all intentional on our part because we suspected that the yellow tape that has been put up around the life of Jesus was put up by mankind, not by Jesus himself. Mm-hmm. And that's what Christ consciousness is. Jesus came to show us what it looked like. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. But there are ways to tap into this because it's all inside. Joseph Campbell says, like, all of the gods, all of the heavens, all of the hells, they're inside of you. It's about getting your antenna right and losing your ego and tapping into this eternal good energy and being led by it.
So how does one begin to detach from their ego? I mean, that's a pretty tall order, especially for those of us who have been raised to be performance-driven people.
Sure, yeah. I think it starts with being a little suspicious that we have been programmed, that we have programming. And, Proverbs says, if you seek with all of your heart, you will find. And I think being suspicious of my ego's involvement in my day-to-day living, like I've got to do this, I've got to be here, we've got to do this, watching my emotions and my attitude fluctuate is a great indicator that your ego is involved. Big wins really shouldn't rock your world. Big losses shouldn't really rock your world when the ego is involved. Anxiety and depression can become an ingrained pattern that has to be broken, but most of the time it is an indicator that your ego is running your life, right? And so some people can get to a place where they're aware of their ego and they try to like offset the power of their ego, and they're dealing with like generational like patterns and grooves that they've got to work out of. But most of the time, like if your emotions are up and down and you're all over the place, it's because your ego is involved. Your ego says, I have to have this relationship in order to be happy in life. Right. I've got to be making this in order to be satisfied in life. And so in the same way, Augustine says, like, what are we loving when we love God? Like, we really can get into any given situation and say, why do I think that I have to have this in order to be happy or whole? And like the idea of the kingdom coming in all of its fullness and receiving, as we've said on this podcast before, like gratitude is a receiving posture. When I would take my 2-year-old and put a baseball glove in their hand and say, don't move, I would position them to receive the ball that I was going to throw directly into that glove. Gratitude is a receiving posture. And so what Jesus came to model is like when you detach from ego that says, I need this in order to be like happy and grateful. When you get rid of that, then you can be just grateful as it is. And the law of attraction says you will start to attract more things to yourself to be grateful for when you divorce yourself from your ego that says, if I have that relationship, I will then be happy. Mm-hmm. No, that doesn't work. What you actually have is a sense of ego that has created disappointment, which means you will constantly attract more disappointment and more situations to be disappointed about to you. Right. Because your ego is running your life. The self. Yeah.
Okay, so how do you dismantle your ego? Same question. Like, what are some like really practical practices that people can do? Because I mean, this is like so anti what we're used to.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, it's just like a completely different direction.
Well, I would do a little bit of an audit and say, what is feeding my ego? Like, what gets me really happy and excited? What gets me out of bed in the morning? What makes Saturday different from Monday? When you lose your ego, there is no Saturday, there is no Monday. And this is what Jesus meant by, like, in the kingdom, there's no male or female, there's no Jew or Greek, there's no free or slave. When you lose your ego, like, everyone is valuable. Everyone is an image bearer of God.
So what do you think church looks like when people have lost their ego?
Good one.
Thank you.
Good transition.
Thanks.
Well, I mean, that's, you've worked on staff now for about 5 years. City Church Dayton, which is the church that I planted 15 years ago. We have recently made an announcement to the congregation after working with the elders and trustees over a 6-month period of time that we are dismantling what is known to be City Church Dayton and are going to live into a movement within City Church Dayton called MVLA, Miami Valley Life Alliance, because such a time as this, like we have realized, and I can tell the story about where we were 6 or 7 months ago when this all came up, but sometimes in order to see the real thing, you have to get rid of what has become an imitation of the real thing, or get rid of the old thing to see the new thing. And so about 6 months ago, I was living into my self-care day on Mondays, and I was face down getting a massage, and I heard the voice, God or the eternal energy say to me, I want you to ask this question tonight to the elders and trustees, and here's how I want you to do it. And so I went to the meeting and had a big whiteboard, and I felt like I was supposed to write the question, are we supposed to close City Church Dayton? And then I did not let the elders or trustees see it. And I said, now listen, I wrote a question on the back of this board. I want you to hear with your spirit whether or not the answer is yes or no. And I said, okay, don't forget God sounds like you, right? Like if you say the Golden Gate Bridge exists in this state, the state is, and then nobody talks, everybody hears California. That's how God speaks to us, right? It sounds like our own voice, and so does the devil, because we have to interpret energy and turn it into words and thoughts. And so I did that with these elders and trustees, and there were 9 people there.
So they didn't see the question.
Nope.
And first they needed to come up with an answer by
Correct.
hearing.
Yes or no.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
They did not know the question, but I wanted them to hear, because in the energetic realm, which that's what Colossians 1 is describing, like a set of energetic rules. That's what karma attempts to describe. That's what Jesus was saying by you reap what you sow. Like there are energetic rules that govern the world, seen and unseen. And that's what this whole podcast is about. The real reason everything happens for a reason. And so I said, listen, like you just got to practice. You heard the name of the state. Now here we go. Yes or no. Right? Okay. Then we go around the circle and I said, okay, give me your answer. The first 8 out of 9 people say yes to the answer. Mm-hmm. The 9th self-admittedly probably said no in his words because everybody else said yes. Yeah. That's what he says after the fact. Yeah. I flipped the board around and everybody almost fell down. Mm-hmm.
And they were sitting.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. You don't close a church.
Right.
You just don't do that.
Sure.
And so we have been working together over the last 6 months, elders, trustees, pastoral staff, to transition to becoming an actual community center that walks out the life of Jesus, the life of Josh, right? That shows us what God in the flesh looks like. And overwhelmingly, the large majority of people that have been given the question or have been able to think about it without their biases getting in the way, like, oh my gosh, we've only ever done church on Sundays. They've come back and said, like, no, I feel good about this. Yeah. Person after person after person, and you were there, you can speak to this, like, yeah, actually, I just had a dream about this. Or,
so many people had already
this.
been thinking about it. And you know what? Like, as you're saying that, it's like there's a great place to begin practicing detaching from the ego.
Oh gosh.
Like, I mean, for you as the leader of the church, who, I mean, you've poured your life into this place for 15 years.
Yeah.
And then for the people who call this place home, it's, I mean, what a huge way to begin like putting into practice.
Yeah, for sure.
Laying down or taking up your cross, laying down, whatever you want to call it. But putting your ego aside because like, this is what's comfortable and this is what we know. And this is like the routine that we're in. And this is, I mean, it feels good and whatever. And so to completely transition to something new is, talk about uncomfortable.
Well, transitioning to something that puts the needs of the actual people in our community as the priority. And it gets rid of the blurry line between being in or out when it comes to the actual Jesus movement. The large majority of the 76% of Americans that claim to be Jesus followers don't do much more than go and sit in some sort of pew or chair on a Sunday for an hour and a half to 2 hours and then leave and come back the next week. It just does not work when it comes to inheriting, and this is the big point, inheriting Christ consciousness and tapping into eternity now. That's why we're fighting. That's what we are after, is people receiving and tapping into heaven now. I have had every crazy thing that you could think of said to me by a number of people that have heard this is going to take place. Like even my own family members, some people are asking questions like, have you given up on your calling? Somebody came up to me Sunday after I made the smaller announcement and said, do you think you're compromising? And my thing is, no, compromising would be me going back on payroll here at the church and sitting in an office, getting to read a sacred text for 40 hours a week and then getting up and sharing when it doesn't take a lot of work for me to do that anymore. Like I've done it for 15 years. I can prepare a message pretty quickly.
Yeah, I can't. And I think that goes even further to show that like you're not going to be able to do this if you're attached to your ego.
Correct.
Because there's going to be a lot of people who said like, ooh, sorry, your church failed.
Sure. Oh, of course.
That's too bad.
Of course.
Or sorry, you lost your faith. Or
of course.
Lost yourself and all of that. So
yeah, of course. But what they're really saying is they're uncomfortable with the destruction of a system that has not served humanity well.
Well, and it's going to require that they do something
for
themselves.
Sure.
That's not going to be handed to them
for
anymore.
Sure. And so I said to the congregation on Sunday, like, we're abandoning the idea of church as a 1 day a week thing. That's what we're abandoning. Mm-hmm. And instead, we're going to expose the church to the church and have opportunities for you to be in this community center 6 days a week or 7 days a week versus 1 day a week. We're going to dismantle what you recognize to be a church staff, which doesn't really make sense within historical context of the Jesus movement, and instead recognize the body as being the church, which the body has a lot of parts. A mouth cannot do what Jesus did. A mouth in and of itself cannot do what Jesus did. And the reason why so many people are bankrupt and are hurting and are not experiencing Christ consciousness or these kingdom-oriented things is because they have thought they can show up and just watch someone talk and they can be talked into eternal life. You can't. You have to walk it out. And you know, we've shared the last couple of weeks Richard Rohr's quote, like, you don't believe your way, you don't think your way into new ways of living. You live your way into new ways of thinking. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. We're getting back to, and it only took 15 years, no big deal. We're getting back to like recognizing Jesus, the actual real Jesus movement was a movement that was detached from ego and walked things out. It was a mobile movement. And it's not to say that we can't have gatherings here and people can't enjoy their company, you know, one another's company. We will do that. But we're going away from the understanding of the church being a building that we occupy 1 day a week for a couple of hours, and instead emphasizing the church is a group of people with many gifts and many experiences, but what should unite them is their oneness around the idea of detaching from ego, which ego promotes self and individual and a lack of unity. Oh, yeah, Jesus' words in John 17, like, I pray that they are one. Well, the only way you become one is by laying down your needs and your rights to pursue that of like the other person.
You know what a great practice is for laying down your ego that is really going to ruffle some Christian feathers?
Go.
Dancing.
I thought you were going to say that.
Yes.
For sure.
Oh my gosh.
I just did that.
Danced?
Yes, in my mastermind group to show you what kind of group this is.
Yeah.
We did we were with a specialist that was, I think it's called 5 Rivers.
A dancing specialist?
Yes.
Okay.
Different kinds of tribal dancing. Now I've certified
my goodness.
craziness.
Just throw your
Now
phone
you
into
don't
the
have
river.
to listen to me. You don't have to listen to me.
Do you want to speak to more specifics of what the community center will look like? Or are you going to? Okay.
Yeah. But hold on, let's finish the dance piece.
Oh, yes. Go ahead.
The dance piece is like losing your ego.
You know, we're on video right now. Do you want to show us some of your moves?
No, I'm not quite there. I'm working
All right.
on
It's
it.
okay, little ego.
I'm working
We'll
on
get there.
I'm working on the stripping of my ego.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Dancing is such a huge, I mean, what a great practice.
For
And
sure.
Just like,
And it's all throughout the sacred scripture that we were raised with, but yet somehow you weren't allowed to dance at a Christian school.
that is still very true at many Christian schools.
Yeah. The problem with an ego-oriented faith is that we are still the center of the story. I'll never forget being at a Christmas dinner like early on with my wife's family, and we got into a debate about like faith and healing. And one person around the table said, like, faith happens when like or healings happen when people have faith. And that is true. You have to have faith the size of a mustard seed, according to Jesus, the size of a mustard seed. But the object is not you. The object is God, faith in God, and then letting like that faith acknowledges, God, if you want to heal me, heal me. If you don't, I understand.
Yeah.
And so I used Helen Keller as an example of someone that has reached more people than the large majority of us will ever reach. She has prayed and asked God to heal her. God hasn't done it. And so I just said to this family member, does she need to close her eyes like tighter or like hold her hand, like fold her hands better or stay on her knees longer? Like what's the deal? And the idea of that is, oh yeah, ego even creeps into how we process God and whether or not we are worthy to participate.
Right.
And so like dancing can destroy the flesh. People would say, oh, it promotes the flesh. In most cases, it's going to destroy it more than anything. I'm not talking about some provocative dancing. I'm just talking about dancing in general.
It's about your intentions, I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And so as far as what the community center looks like, as of right now, and like we're not committed to putting everything on paper and saying this is exactly what it's going to be, because that's not faith.
Well, that's ego.
We've definitely been planning and talking with elders and trustees now for 6 months, and we're just getting ready to start practicing in June and July. But right now, what it's looking like is that there are going to be, the idea of the community center is that it inspires, it empowers, it equips, and it supports the people that want to be a part of it. That's what it does. It will inspire you, and we've got things set up to do that. A once a month meeting that's going to, be in a larger room with singing and testimonies and an encouraging, inspiring message.
And food.
Food will be around, like a New Testament thing. But it's like inspiration. It's empowering you by equipping you, giving you tools, helping you better understand yourself, helping you better understand the community, and then supporting, coming alongside and saying, okay, how can we help you? Like, those are the things that we're going to live into. And then there's categories that, we call capitals, that represent the different areas of a person's life that need to be like full bank accounts versus empty. And so these 5 areas are like your finances, your intellect, your physical body, your relationships, and your spirit. And so we will inspire, empower, equip, and support you in those 5 areas: your finances, your intellect, your physicality, your relationships, and your spirit. And that's what it's going to be, but it's not going to be ran and empowered by a small group of people. A small group of people will help keep it organized and administrate it, but it's going to be ran by the real definition of a church is, and that is a group of people that come from different places with different knowledge and different experiences to make it what it is. Right now, in the traditional model of church, especially after the pandemic, you have to beg people to volunteer.
Oh my gosh.
And
Miserable.
if their cat happens to have a different obligation on Sunday morning,
Yes.
they are going to call in and say that they cannot be there because, their cat's friends changed their plans and now they have to get Tommy or whatever the cat is to wherever it needs to go, and they can't come. Tom, yeah, thank you. And they can't volunteer.
Yeah.
And why is that? Why traditionally is the rate of a volunteer in a church organization in North America 10 to 20% participation level? Because we've built a model around listening to people talk versus a functional equipping model that teaches people how to teach people to live the life that they are actually experiencing versus projecting.
Right.
And so I think practically speaking, it will be like the building will be open 7 days a week. Once a month, we'll have a large gathering, but like we're not going to gather on Sunday mornings anymore. And there's a place for people that have a gift to communicate publicly, as is, or there will be a place for everyone and everyone's gift where they can give it back to the community that they belong to.
Mm-hmm.
And so, did this approach to church work for a time period? Yeah, of course it did. When our country was being founded, we took what we learned in Europe and we tweaked it a little bit to try to get more government out of it, human government, and like more God in it. And it was a step in the right direction. But like congregationalism, where people come and they sit in chairs and listen to one person talk, that is a model that's over 100 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And everything in the world has changed, but the way we approach getting the life of God into society. And really, we're not inventing anything new. We're going back to model what Jesus modeled, especially if you start to see Jesus as an archetype of a person that came to show us what a person can accomplish and how they can influence the world when they get rid of their ego.
Yeah.
And so why was Jesus killed? Who was Jesus killed by? Power systems. You don't need to say the Jews or the Romans. Both is the answer. Power systems. Mm-hmm. Because he was trying to strip the significance of life being wrapped around or tied to human organizations that tell you you are valuable because of this. And instead say, no, you are inherently valuable because of whose image you were made in. And here's the hardware that you've been given to tap into this energy, Christ consciousness, that will draw the right things to you and repel the wrong things from you.
Yeah. Super exciting.
I think so. I think it's really exciting. But if you're wrapped up in old institutions and you can't change because you were told that change is a lack of faith, which is absolutely backwards, then you're going to struggle with it.
That's
and
really hard.
As I've told some of the people that are disappointed in me because I'm doing my best to follow what I feel like God has said, like, go start your own thing. And that's the thing about the ego. Like, if you're upset and you think this is the wrong direction, go embrace what you've always embraced and put a cute sign out front and tell people you're doing it and see how many people show up.
Sure.
But I mean, there are a lot of quote unquote churches that are down 80 or 90% still after the pandemic.
For sure.
Why? Because God loved us enough to allow, something to come out of Wuhan to disrupt the whole world and primarily disrupt the church to get rid of an old model that is ineffective. Mm-hmm. It's great at paying pastor salaries. It's great at keeping a staff of people, that are relevant and play great music and serve coffee on Sunday mornings. It's great at keeping them employed. Changing the community, doing what Jesus did and hanging out with people that are less than what they want to be, prostitutes, criminals, drunkards. Like, no, we're not doing that. Our model's not doing that.
Gosh, the number of people that I encounter down at the restaurant,
Yeah.
who, you know, when I tell them that I work at a church and like the visceral reaction that they have
Sure.
because of the experience that they've had by people in the church who have completely
Yeah.
shut them out because of whatever, their lifestyle or whatever. I mean, it is disturbing.
For sure.
It's incredibly disturbing.
They're talking about power systems and people that erected these power systems in order to tell another group of people they're wrong. And like within the kingdom, let's keep stirring people up here. There's no right, there's no wrong, there's no good, there's no bad. There's not. What becomes the bullseye, which hamartia, the word for sin, the Greek word for sin, is missing the bullseye. The bullseye is whatever you are being led to do by God in that moment.
Yeah.
And that's why we say sin is not a something. It's usually context and timing. And so when you remove, this is so funny. When you remove people's ability to say, you're right and I'm wrong, I'm right and you're wrong, for the control freak that has used religion to assert and reinforce their value, the lie that they tell to themselves, like, oh, I am valuable because I am good.
Yeah.
You're not reading your Bible. Paul says even on your best day, your performance isn't going to do it. Yeah. So let's give up on that. When you remove the system by which people have used that system to determine they are more valuable than you, watch out. Right? And so, you know, when you get into the way like homosexuals or anyone, like transgenders, have been treated by the church, the frustration with the homosexual community is that mankind has erected belief systems for themselves, not that says this is where you belong or don't belong, but that says this person is valuable and this person is not valuable. This person is going to inherit heaven and this person is going to inherit hell. And then the people within the homosexual community watch the hypocrisy that exists within the lives of those people that are saying, I'm inherently a little bit better than you because I'm not sleeping with the same sex. Right. They see the hypocrisy and want nothing to do with it because deep down inside, they know that it's a movement that God is not leading. It's ego that is leading that.
For sure.
And so, again, another practical example of what this community will look like, which will help people determine whether or not they fit in, is it will be operated off of the life of Jesus. That will be our standard, not the epistles. 10 years ago, the Lord said to me, I was doing sermon prep, and God said to me, the epistles have to be ran through the life of Jesus. The life of Jesus does not have to be ran through the epistles. That the way we keep cultural context in check in the epistles is by looking at what Jesus did when he encountered the same thing.
Right.
So in Corinthians 10, when it says liars, nor adulterers, nor homosexuals will inherit the kingdom, we have to run that back through the life of Jesus and see how Jesus interacted with all of those people, by which everyone that is listening to this podcast, you are an adulterer if you've ever lusted after anyone. Mm-hmm. And so like understanding all of these things and understanding that a lot of what we inherited were human power systems used to develop classes of value. It needs to come down, and it is coming down. Eventually, the truth in life and time exposes everything that is untrue.
For sure.
And so this community is going to be ran off of the Gospels. So when Jesus was in front of someone, like John chapter 8, the woman caught in the act of adultery, she is supposed to be stoned. Mm-hmm. Whoever she was having the affair with was not there. These men drug her into Jesus' presence, and it had nothing to do with right, wrong, good, or bad. Nothing. It all had to do with trapping Jesus. They wanted to trap him because he was not creating a system by which their ego could attach to, and they hated him for it because all of these lame-ass people were going to lose their sense of significance.
Sure.
So when he starts to dismantle it, they're trying to trap him, and they drag her into his presence and say, okay, the law says she dies. She's stoned. And, you know the story. He leans down into the dust and starts writing. Some people think he's writing like names of people that those men have lusted after or that they've, been inappropriate with. Who knows? but they all leave. And Jesus, this person embodying the life of God and showing us how God thinks in that present moment about that present person, he says, woman, where are your accusers? Neither do I accuse you. Stop doing what is less than the best for yourself. And she's gone.
Yeah.
And we hear nothing else about it.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, this community is going to be driven by the Gospels versus the epistles. And the two rules that I made up, and I guess I just get to make rules up,
Okay.
that really determine whether or not you're going to fit in this community is, number one, you have to acknowledge your need for grace, mercy, and forgiveness as much as anyone that has ever lived or is on this planet right now. That's number one.
Okay.
Number two, you have to agree that you cannot and are not interested in changing anyone.
I like it.
Why? Why are we saying that with both of those? We're saying that your ego can't be involved. Ego involved and disguised as Christianity or any other faith movement ruins the world. It ruins the world.
Number 3, you have to dance your way in the door.
Okay. All right. You can dance your way in the door.
2B.
But you know what I'm saying? Like Jesus said, you guys are blind guides. You're the one that you're supposed to be leading people, and you are blind.
Right.
You put burdens on people's backs that are twice the son and make them twice the son of hell as you are. You guys are whitewashed tombs, meaning you look great on the outside, like it was limestone. You were all shined up and you look great. You're dead on the inside. You're dead.
For sure.
That was all Jesus.
Yep.
And so if we can make this about John 10:10, like I came to give you life and give it to you more abundantly, and we can take the yellow tape off of Jesus that says, we know how this works, and here are the people that are in, and here are the people that are not. Romans 14:1, who are you to judge another person's servant? That person rises and falls based on who they belong to, not you. And so that's what we're after. That's what we've been spending months going after, and I feel like the Lord has confirmed it, and that we're headed in the right direction, that this is going to go away from being identified as a church and instead be what Jesus launched, and that is a community-oriented movement that all centers around life that is primarily discovered by the losing of the ego.
It's amazing.
That's what you're opting in for. It's like, I'm losing my ego. Yeah. I'm going to give my life to the present moment to be given to other people.
I wish you had something to say about it.
Oh yeah, I guess this episode is a little longer.
Sorry, Gelman. It's good though. It's super exciting.
Very exciting.
Go ahead.
Can you sign us off right there on that camera?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. That's it, ladies.
Perfect. Okay.